What happens when the ugly sister, who's been invisible her whole life, discovers her golden child sibling is planning to destroy an innocent man's life for money? And what if that same invisible sister has been secretly recording every cruel word, every manipulative scheme, every moment of truth? Well, let me tell you about the night I handed my sister's fiancé a flash drive that contained something he definitely wasn't expecting to see. The crystal chandeliers cast their golden glow across the rooftop terrace of one of Manhattan's most exclusive venues. Celeste had spared no expense for her engagement party. White roses cascaded from every corner, champagne flutes sparkled in manicured hands, and the city's skyline provided the perfect backdrop for what she clearly intended to be her coronation as the perfect bride-to-be. I stood near the edge of the crowd, nursing my second glass of champagne, and already regretting my decision to come. But this was my sister's engagement party. Family obligation trumped personal comfort, even when that family had spent the better part of 3 decades making it clear I was more of an afterthought than an actual member. Celeste floated through the crowd in her designer cocktail dress, her engagement ring catching the light with every dramatic gesture. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who got the lead in every school play while I painted sets backstage, the one who dated the quarterback while I tutored him in algebra so he wouldn't get kicked off the team. Tonight was no different. She was holding court in the center of the terrace, surrounded by her sorority sisters and society friends, while I occupied my usual position on the periphery. Some things never change, I thought, watching her throw her head back in that practiced laugh she'd perfected in college. Grace and her fiancé seemed genuinely happy. He kept looking at her like she hung the moon, which honestly made what I knew even more heartbreaking. He was a good guy. Successful, kind, completely head over heels in love with my sister. He deserved so much better than what was coming for him. The crowd began to quiet as someone clinked a knife against their champagne flute. Toast time. My stomach clenched because I knew with absolute certainty that whatever Celeste was about to say would somehow find a way to cut me down while building herself up. It was her specialty. "Thank you all so much for being here tonight," Celeste began, her voice carrying that sweet Southern belle inflection she'd adopted somewhere around her sophomore year of college. "Grayson and I are just so blessed to have all of our favorite people here to celebrate with us." She paused, scanning the crowd with theatrical precision. Her eyes landed on me for just a moment, and I saw something flicker there. Something that made my blood run cold. You know, when Grayson asked me to marry him, the first thing I thought about was choosing my maid of honor, and I realized I needed someone who could really compliment me on my special day. Someone who wouldn't, well, let's just say someone who wouldn't steal focus from the bride. A few people chuckled. My parents standing near the bar exchanged one of those looks, the kind that said they knew exactly where this was going and had no intention of stopping it. I mean, we all know Lauren has always been more of the behind-the-scenes type anyway. Better with flowers than photos, if you know what I mean. More laughter rippled through the crowd. "So, I've asked my beautiful sorority sister Blake to be my maid of honor. Blake, come here, gorgeous." Blake, all blonde highlights and perfectly veneered teeth, squealed and rushed over to hug Celeste. The crowd erupted in applause. I stood there, champagne glass frozen halfway to my lips, feeling like I'd been slapped across the face in front of 80 people. But here's the thing about being the family's scapegoat for 32 years. You get really, really good at keeping your face neutral when your heart is being carved out with a rusty spoon. So I smiled. I even managed to clap a little. I caught Uncle Dean's eye from across the terrace. He was the only one in my family who'd ever really seen me. Really understood what it was like to be the one who didn't quite fit the mold. He was looking at my hands, and I realized I was gripping my champagne flute so hard my knuckles had gone white. He worked his way through the crowd until he was standing beside me. "Same old Celeste," he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear. I looked at him and smiled. A real smile this time. "Not for much longer," I said quietly. Celeste raised her glass high above her head. To new beginnings, to true love, and to having the most perfect wedding party a girl could ask for. The crowd raised their glasses in unison. I raised mine too, my smile growing wider. To truth and timing, I said, my voice carrying just enough to make a few people near me turn and look. Then I reached into my small clutch and pulled out a elegantly wrapped gift box. Nothing fancy, just simple white paper with a silver ribbon. I walked through the crowd, which parted easily, because everyone was still caught up in the toast, and approached Grayson. Grayson, I said, my voice warm and genuine. I have something for you. A little engagement gift. His face lit up the way it always did when someone showed him kindness. Lauren, you didn't have to do that. Thank you so much. He took the box with both hands, carefully untying the ribbon. Celeste watched from a few feet away, her expression shifting from confusion to something that looked almost like panic. She knew me well enough to know I didn't usually make grand gestures. Grayson lifted the lid of the box. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, was a simple flash drive. Nothing more, nothing less. His smile faltered. He looked up at me, then at the flash drive, then back at me. What's this for? The conversations around us began to quiet. People were starting to notice that something was happening. The music from the string quartet seemed to stutter and fade. I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. The truth, I said simply. Everything you need to know is on there, but maybe wait until you get home to watch it. Grayson's face went completely pale. His hand started to shake slightly as he held the flash drive. And for the first time in my entire life, I watched my sister Celeste lose control of a room. The golden hour was ending, and the real show was about to begin. Standing there, watching Grayson's world start to crumble, I couldn't help but think about how we got here. How 32 years of being invisible in my own family had led to this moment. Because what happened tonight didn't start with that flash drive. It started when I was 7 years old and learned that some people are born to shine and others are born to make sure the spotlight never dims. I was always the afterthought. The "oh, and Lauren too" addition to every family story. When people asked my parents how many kids they had, there would be this tiny pause before they remembered to count me. It wasn't malicious exactly. It was just that Celeste took up so much space in every room that there wasn't much left over for anyone else. Take school plays, for instance. I spent weeks auditioning, memorizing lines, practicing in front of my bedroom mirror. I'd get small parts, nothing major, but I was proud of them. Until Celeste would decide she wanted to be in the same production. Suddenly, the girl who'd originally gotten the lead would mysteriously drop out, and Celeste would swoop in to save the day. The teachers loved her for being so generous with her time. I'd get moved to stage crew painting backdrops and moving props, watching from the wings as my sister basked in applause. That should have been partly mine. It happened with friends too. I'd make a connection with someone at school, start building a real friendship, and then Celeste would show up. She had this way of becoming the most interesting person in any group within about 15 minutes. My friends would start inviting her to hang out instead of me. Not because they didn't like me, but because being around Celeste felt like being close to something special, something important. And I was just Lauren, regular, unremarkable Lauren, but there's one memory that still makes my chest tight when I think about it. I was 12, and I'd been taking piano lessons for 2 years. I wasn't naturally gifted like Celeste was at everything she touched, but I worked hard. I practiced every single day after school, my fingers stumbling over the keys until they finally found their rhythm. My teacher had chosen me to perform a solo at the spring recital, Chopin's Minute Waltz. It wasn't the most complex piece in the world, but for me, it might as well have been Carnegie Hall. I practiced that piece until I could play it in my sleep. Mom had bought me a new dress, navy blue, with tiny white flowers. I felt special for once. Actually special. The recital was on a Tuesday night in the school auditorium, and for the first time in my life, I was going to be the one in the spotlight. 20 minutes before my performance, Celeste had what she called an anxiety attack. She started hyperventilating in the lobby, crying about how she was so worried about me performing that she couldn't breathe. Mom and Dad surrounded her, fanning her with programs and getting her water while she gasped dramatically about how much pressure I must be feeling. By the time they got her calmed down, they'd missed my entire performance. I played that Chopin waltz perfectly, every single note exactly where it should be, to an audience that included my piano teacher, about 30 other families, and the empty seats where my parents should have been sitting. Afterward, when I found them in the lobby, Celeste was sitting in a chair looking pale and tragic. Mom hugged me and said she was so sorry they'd missed it, but Celeste had been really sick and they couldn't leave her alone. Dad patted my shoulder and said he was sure I'd done great and maybe I could play it for them at home sometime. I never played piano again after that night. College was supposed to be different. I chose a school 3 states away, somewhere Celeste would never follow. For 2 beautiful years, I got to be just Lauren. Not Celeste's sister, not the disappointing one, just me. I made friends who knew nothing about my family dynamics. I dated a little. I even joined the gardening club and discovered I had a real talent for growing things. Then spring of my junior year, Celeste announced she was transferring to my school. Her original college wasn't challenging her creatively anymore. She wanted a fresh start somewhere with better opportunities. Somewhere like the school I'd specifically chosen to get away from her. Within a month of arriving, she was dating Marcus. Marcus, who I'd been quietly crushing on for the better part of a year. Marcus, who I'd finally worked up the courage to talk to in our comparative literature class. Marcus, who'd started walking me to my dorm after our Tuesday night study sessions and making me think that maybe, just maybe something real was developing between us. But why would Marcus want quiet, bookish Lauren when he could have Celeste, vibrant, exciting Celeste who threw parties in her dorm room and knew how to make every conversation feel like the most important thing in the world? They were engaged 6 months later. Married the summer after graduation. That marriage lasted exactly 18 months, which surprised absolutely no one except Marcus. After college, I did what I'd always done. I found a quiet corner of the world where I could exist without taking up too much space. I opened a small flower shop in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify. Nothing fancy, nothing that would ever threaten to outshine anyone else's accomplishments. Just me, my flowers, and the kind of customers who appreciated beauty without needing to broadcast it to the world. I was actually happy. For the first time in my adult life, I was building something that was entirely mine. My shop had character. Mismatched vintage vases, flowers. I grew myself in the back garden, handwritten care instructions, tied to each bouquet with ribbon. My customers weren't just buying flowers. They were buying into a feeling, a moment of quiet beauty in their busy lives. Celeste visited about once a month, always unannounced. Always with that look on her face like she was touring a museum exhibit about how not to live your life. She'd pick up random items, examine them with barely concealed disdain, and make little comments that felt like paper cuts. "It's so cute how you've made this place feel so homey, very cottage-core." She'd run her fingers along my handmade displays. "I just don't know how you stand the smell of all these flowers every day. Doesn't it give you headaches?" Or she'd flip through my appointment book and comment on my prices. "You know, you could probably charge twice this much if you updated your branding a little. Got some professional photos taken. Maybe hired someone to help with your social media presence." The suggestions always came wrapped in concern, like she was genuinely trying to help her poor, naive little sister understand how the real world worked. But underneath every helpful tip was the same message I'd been hearing my entire life. "You're not doing it right. You're not enough. You need to be more like me." The thing about emotional damage is that it doesn't leave visible scars. Nobody can see the way your shoulders tense up when your family enters a room, or how you automatically check your reflection in every mirror, to make sure you're not somehow embarrassing them just by existing. They can't measure the weight of always being the one who gets interrupted mid-sentence, or the ache of watching your achievements get overshadowed by someone else's drama every single time. But You learn to carry it. You learn to smile when someone makes a joke at your expense, to laugh along when your own family treats you like the punchline to a story you never wanted to be part of. You become an expert at swallowing disappointment, at finding ways to make yourself smaller so that everyone else can feel bigger. You get really, really good at being invisible. Until one day you decide you don't want to be invisible anymore. And that's when things get interesting. The universe has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. After 32 years of being overlooked and underestimated, the truth literally fell into my lap on a random Thursday afternoon in March. Celeste had stopped by the shop that day, ostensibly to help me pick out flowers for Mom's birthday. In reality, she spent 40 minutes critiquing my inventory and suggesting I should consider silk arrangements because they'd be more practical for your customer base. She was in one of her moods, the kind where she needed to remind everyone in her vicinity that she was the successful one, the important one, the one whose opinions actually mattered. She'd been scrolling through her iPad the entire time, occasionally showing me photos from her latest weekend getaway with Grayson. "Look at this suite we had in the Hamptons," she'd say, angling the screen toward me. "Grayson insisted on the oceanfront view. He's so generous with everything." When she finally left, I felt that familiar exhaustion that came after spending time with my sister. Like I'd been holding my breath for an hour and could finally exhale. I was arranging white tulips in the front window when I noticed it. Her iPad sitting on my counter next to the register, still glowing with whatever she'd been looking at. I should have called her immediately. That would have been the normal thing to do, the good sister thing to do. Instead, I stared at it for a long moment, listening to the afternoon traffic outside and the soft jazz playing through my shop speakers. That's when the notification popped up. A message bubble appeared at the top of the screen. "See you Friday. Bring the hotel key." From someone named Troy. I knew that name. Troy Richardson, Celeste's ex-boyfriend from about 3 years ago. The one who'd started some kind of tech company and was always posting about entrepreneurship and mindset coaching on social media. The one Celeste had dated for about 6 months before deciding he wasn't quite successful enough for her long-term plans. My finger hovered over the screen. This was private. This was none of my business. This was exactly the kind of boundary-crossing behavior that would give Celeste ammunition to use against me for the next decade. But something about that message felt wrong. Bring the hotel key. Why would my engaged sister be bringing hotel keys to her ex-boyfriend? I tapped the message. What I found made my stomach drop to the floor. Months of messages. Dozens and dozens of them going back to right around the time Celeste and Grayson had gotten engaged. Screenshots, voice messages, photos. An entire secret relationship playing out in real time while my sister planned her dream wedding to a man who clearly had no idea what was really happening. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow," from 2 weeks ago. "Gray's working late again, perfect timing." "Did you transfer the deposit for the Tribeca property from last month?" "Once the prenup clause expires, we'll have access to everything." 18 months, from Troy. "That's all we need to wait. Then you file for divorce, we liquidate his portfolio, and we're set for the real estate venture." I sat down hard on the stool behind my counter, the iPad shaking in my hands. "He's so predictable," Celeste had written. "Flowers every Friday, same restaurant every month for date nights. He actually thinks I love him for him, not his trust fund." "What if he gets suspicious?" Troy had replied. "Please, Grayson thinks I hung the moon. And even if he didn't, who's he going to complain to? His family loves me. My family worships me. I'm untouchable." There were voice messages too. I clicked on one from last week and heard my sister's voice, but not the sweet Southern Belle version she used in public. This was Celeste unfiltered, talking to someone she thought would never judge her. I swear, if I have to pretend to be interested in his boring finance stories for much longer, I'm going to lose my mind. But the man is worth $43 million, Troy. $43 million. I can fake interest in compound interest rates for 18 months if it means we can buy that building in Brooklyn, and 3 more after that. I clicked on another one. The wedding's going to cost him about 200,000, but that's pocket change compared to what we'll walk away with. And the best part, everyone will feel sorry for me when he turns out to be controlling and emotionally unavailable. I'll be the victim who had to escape a toxic marriage. There were screenshots of Grayson's bank statements, photos of legal documents I didn't understand but that clearly showed dollar amounts with a lot of zeros. Text threads where Troy and Celeste debated which properties to target first, which investments to liquidate, how to make sure the divorce looked legitimate and unavoidable. "Your sister's still suspicious of you?" Troy had asked in one message. Lauren, "God no, she's too busy playing with her little flowers to notice anything important. Even if she did figure something out, who would believe her? I'm the golden child, remember? She's just the weird one who never got married." I set the iPad down on the counter and walked to my back office. I sat in my desk chair and stared at the wall for exactly 10 minutes, watching the afternoon light shift through my small window. Then I walked back out, picked up the iPad, and started taking screenshots. I wasn't angry. That's the weird part. I thought I would be furious seeing my sister plot to destroy a genuinely good man who loved her. I thought I'd be devastated realizing that even in her private moments, she saw me as nothing more than a harmless afterthought. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Clarity. For the first time in my adult life, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I spent the next 2 hours methodically documenting everything. Screenshots of the most damning conversations, voice message transcripts, photos of financial documents. I organized it all in a folder on my laptop, cross-referenced dates, created a timeline that told the story from beginning to end. By the time I heard Celeste's key in my front door, I'd already emailed the entire folder to myself 3 times and saved copies to 2 different cloud storage accounts. "Lauren, I think I left my iPad here," she called out, her voice back to its usual performative sweetness. "Right here on the counter," I replied, not looking up from the bouquet I was arranging. White roses and baby's breath. Simple. Clean. Perfect for someone who wanted to look innocent. She grabbed the iPad and clutched it to her chest dramatically. "Thank God. I would die if I lost this thing. All my wedding planning is on here." "I bet it is," I said quietly. She paused at the door and looked back at me. "What did you say?" "Nothing important." I smiled at her. "Just thinking about how much planning goes into making something look perfect from the outside." She stared at me for a moment, and I saw something flicker across her face. Suspicion, maybe. Or just confusion about why her usually predictable little sister was acting slightly off script. "Well, anyway, thanks for watching it for me. See you at Sunday dinner." After she left, I locked the front door and flipped my sign to closed. Then I called Uncle Dean. "You free for dinner tonight?" I asked when he picked up. "I'm making pasta and I think we need to talk." He arrived at my apartment an hour later with a bottle of wine and that look he got when he knew family drama was brewing. Uncle Dean had always been the black sheep of our family, the one who'd never quite fit the mold either. He understood what it meant to watch from the sidelines, while everyone else played their assigned roles. We ate dinner mostly in silence, just the comfortable kind of quiet that comes with being around someone who doesn't need you to perform. Afterward, he helped me clear the dishes, and that's when he noticed the manila folders stacked neatly on my dining room table. "What's all this?" he asked, nodding toward the paperwork. I looked at him for a long moment. Uncle Dean had been asking me for years when I was going to stop letting Celeste walk all over me. He'd been the only one to call out her behavior at family gatherings, the only one who seemed to notice that there was something fundamentally wrong with how she treated people. "Evidence," I said simply. He raised an eyebrow. "Evidence of what?" I opened the top folder and showed him a printed screenshot of one of Celeste's messages, the one where she'd called Grayson predictable and talked about his trust fund. Uncle Dean put on his reading glasses and studied the page. His expression shifted from curiosity to shock to something that looked almost like pride. How long have you known? He asked quietly. About 6 hours, he nodded slowly, turning to the next page, then the next. And what are you planning to do with this? I'm going to tell him the truth. When I thought about Grayson's face at the engagement party, the way he'd looked at that flash drive like it might contain the secrets of the universe. Which in a way it did. Soon, I said. Very soon. Uncle Dean closed the folder and looked at me with something I'd never seen in a family member's eyes before. Respect. You know there's no going back from this, right? Once you blow up her world, she's going to come after you with everything she's got. I thought about that 12-year-old girl who'd played Chopin perfectly to an empty auditorium. About all the times I'd smiled and nodded while my sister diminished me in front of people I cared about. About the way she'd laughed tonight when she called me too ugly to be her maid of honor. Let her come, I said. I'm not invisible anymore. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in probably 15 years. I called Celeste and offered to help with her wedding planning. Oh my God, Lauren really... Her voice went up 3 octaves, the way it always did when she was genuinely surprised. That's so sweet of you. I mean, I know you're not really the event planning type, but there's definitely stuff you could help with. And there it was. Even when I was offering to do her a favor, she managed to slip in a little reminder that I wasn't quite qualified for the important stuff. But for once, I didn't let it sting. I had bigger plans now. I was thinking I could help with the flowers, obviously, but also maybe the engagement party slideshow. I know you've been stressed about getting all the photos and videos organized. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Celeste was probably trying to figure out what angle I was working, because me volunteering for extra responsibility was definitely out of character. You know what, that would actually be amazing, she said finally. I've been meaning to put together something really special, but between work and dress fittings and tasting menus, I just haven't had time. Are you sure you don't mind? I don't mind at all. I actually think it could be really fun. Over the next 2 weeks, I made myself indispensable. I showed up to her apartment with fabric samples for centerpieces. I created detailed spreadsheets for the seating chart, complete with color-coded categories for college friends, work colleagues, and family. I spent an entire Saturday helping her address invitations, listening to her complain about how expensive everything was, while simultaneously bragging about how much Grayson was willing to spend on her. The whole time, I played my role perfectly. Helpful little sister, grateful to finally be included, slightly overwhelmed by all the fancy details, but doing her best to keep up. Celeste ate it up. She started calling me her wedding coordinator and joking to her friends about how she'd finally found a way to put my organizational skills to good use. But the real breakthrough came when I brought up the slideshow again. I've been going through all the photos you gave me, I told her over coffee at her favorite downtown cafe. But I feel like I'm missing some of the story, you know, like I have all these beautiful pictures of you two looking perfect. But what about the behind-the-scenes stuff? The casual moments that really show who you are as a couple? Celeste's eyes lit up. She loved talking about herself, especially when she could frame it as being vulnerable and authentic. You're so right. Grayson is always taking little videos of us doing random stuff. Like, there's this one from last month where we're cooking dinner and I completely mess up the pasta, and we're both just laughing so hard. It's probably not slideshow material, but it's so us, you know. Those are exactly the kinds of moments I'm talking about, I said, leaning forward with fake enthusiasm. The real stuff, the stuff that shows how natural and easy your relationship is. That afternoon, I texted Grayson directly. We'd exchanged numbers a few months earlier when I'd helped him plan a surprise birthday dinner for Celeste, and he'd always been friendly in that genuine way that made me feel bad about what I was about to do to him. Hey Grayson, it's Lauren. I'm putting together a slideshow for Celeste's engagement party, and she mentioned you have some cute, candid videos of you two. Would you mind sharing a few? I want to make this really special for her. He responded within an hour with a link to a shared folder containing about 30 video clips. These are some of my favorites, his message said. Thanks for doing this, Lauren. Celeste is so lucky to have you as a sister. I spent that evening going through every single video. Most of them were exactly what you'd expect. Celeste laughing at something off camera, the two of them at dinner, her showing off a new dress or piece of jewelry. Normal couple stuff. Sweet even. But then I found something interesting. There was a video from about 2 months ago taken at what looked like a work event. Grayson was filming Celeste as she talked to someone just outside the frame. She was in full charm mode the way she got when she was networking, but something about her body language was different. More calculated, more performative than usual. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could read her lips well enough to catch a few phrases. Investment opportunity. Exclusive partnership. My fiancé's connections. And then right at the end of the video, she turned slightly and I saw who she was talking to. Troy Richardson. At an event she'd never mentioned attending, having a conversation she'd certainly never told Grayson about. I saved that video in a separate folder. While I was building my slideshow, I was also working on something else. I'd created an anonymous email account using a VPN and started sending Troy very carefully worded messages. "I know what you and Celeste are planning, Diary," was the first one. Simple, direct, impossible to ignore. He responded within 6 hours. "Who is this? What are you talking about? The Tribeca property, the 18-month plan, Grayson's trust fund, should I keep going?" The next message came back in less than 20 minutes. "What do you want?" Instead of answering, I sent him a screenshot of one of his text conversations with Celeste. Nothing too revealing, just enough to let him know that someone had access to information they shouldn't have. Then I waited. Troy started spiraling almost immediately. I could tell because Celeste started spiraling too. She called me 3 times in one day, ostensibly to check on wedding planning details, but really because she was fishing for information. "Has anyone been asking you questions about me lately?" she asked during the second call. "Like, weird questions about my relationship, or my plans or anything." "What kind of questions?" I asked, injecting just the right amount of confusion into my voice. "I don't know, just people have been acting strange lately. Like they know something I don't know. It's probably nothing, but you know how paranoid I get sometimes." By the end of the week, she was convinced that someone in her social circle was spreading rumors about her. She started accusing different friends of gossiping, demanding to know who they'd been talking to and what they'd heard. It was beautiful to watch, honestly. Celeste's entire power structure was built on information control and image management. The idea that someone else might be pulling strings was making her absolutely crazy. "I think it might be Blake," she told me during one of our planning sessions. "She's been weird ever since I asked her to be maid of honor instead of you. Maybe she thinks I should have chosen you after all." "Why would Blake care about that?" I asked, genuinely curious about how her mind worked. "Because she knows you and I have history. She probably thinks you told me something about her, and now she's trying to get back at me by spreading rumors." Celeste was pacing around her living room, her phone in one hand, and a glass of wine in the other. "Or maybe it's someone from work, someone who's jealous that I'm marrying Grayson." She never once considered that it might be me. Even when she was convinced that someone close to her was working against her, the possibility that her quiet little sister might be capable of strategic thinking never crossed her mind. "You haven't been talking to anyone about my relationship, have you?" she asked me directly one afternoon. We were sitting in her kitchen going over the final details for the engagement party, and she'd been eyeing me suspiciously for the past hour. "What would I even say that you and Grayson seem happy together, that you're planning a beautiful wedding?" I kept my voice level innocent. "Who would I even talk to? I spend most of my time with flowers." She studied my face for a long moment, looking for cracks in my expression. But I'd had 32 years of practice hiding my real thoughts from Celeste. She wasn't going to crack me now. "You're right," she said finally. "I'm just being paranoid. It's probably wedding stress." That night, Uncle Dean came over to help me put the finishing touches on the slideshow. He'd been checking in on me regularly since our dinner conversation, not asking too many questions, but making sure I wasn't getting in over my head. You know there's still time to back out of this, he said as we sat at my dining room table surrounded by printed photos and video timestamps. Once you press play on that projector tomorrow night, everything changes. I know. Celeste is going to come after you with everything she's got. She's going to tell everyone you're jealous, unstable, that you made the whole thing up because you couldn't stand to see her happy. I know. And some people are going to believe her. Some people are always going to think you're the bitter sister who destroyed her family out of spite. I looked up from the laptop where I was making final edits to the slideshow. Uncle Dean was watching me with that same expression he'd had the night I'd shown him the evidence. Part concern, part pride, part recognition of something he'd been waiting to see for years. But if you don't do this, he continued, Grayson marries her. She takes him for everything he's worth, destroys his life, and moves on to the next victim. And you spend the rest of your life knowing you could have stopped it and chose not to. Exactly. He nodded slowly. Then make it clean, Lauren. Make it so clear and so undeniable that even Celeste can't spin her way out of it. If you're going to burn it all down, make sure it burns completely. I ejected the flash drive from my laptop and held it up to the light. Such a small thing to hold so much power. On it was a slideshow that started with sweet photos of Celeste and Grayson looking happy together, progressed through their relationship timeline, and then took a very sharp turn into video evidence of exactly what kind of person my sister really was. Engagement slideshow, final version. I'd labeled it in neat black marker. Tomorrow night, Grayson would finally see the truth about the woman he thought he was going to marry, and Celeste would learn what it felt like to have someone else control the narrative for once. I was ready. And now we come to the night that changed everything. The engagement party was exactly what you'd expect from Celeste. Every detail calculated for maximum impact, every moment choreographed to reinforce her image as the perfect bride-to-be. The venue was stunning. The guest list was carefully curated to include only the most impressive people in her orbit, and she floated through it all in a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I arrived early as promised to help with the final setup. The slideshow equipment was already in place. A professional-grade projector connected to a laptop positioned to cast onto a large white screen that had been set up behind the head table. Everything looked perfect and innocent and exactly as planned. Celeste was in full hostess mode, greeting guests with air kisses and that practiced laugh, making sure everyone understood how blessed and grateful she was to be celebrating with her favorite people. Grayson stayed close to her side, beaming with genuine pride and affection. Every time I looked at him, I felt that familiar twist in my stomach. He really did love her. This was going to destroy him. But some truths are worth the destruction they cause. The evening progressed exactly as scripted. Cocktails, appetizers, the carefully orchestrated mingling period, where Celeste made sure to have meaningful conversations with everyone who mattered. She was performing flawlessly, hitting every mark with the precision of someone who'd been rehearsing this role her entire life. Then came the toasts. Her sorority sisters gushed about what an amazing friend she was. Grayson's business partner made jokes about how she'd managed to pin down Manhattan's most eligible bachelor. Our parents gave a speech about how proud they were of their beautiful daughter and her perfect match. Nobody mentioned me, of course. I was just part of the scenery, the helpful sister who'd arranged the flowers and managed the technical details. Exactly where I'd always been, and exactly where I needed to be for what came next. And now, Celeste announced, her voice carrying easily across the terrace, Lauren put together the most amazing slideshow for us. She spent weeks collecting all our favorite photos and videos. I can't wait for you all to see our love story. The lights dimmed. The projector hummed to life. The screen filled with the opening slide. I designed elegant script reading, Celeste and Grayson, a love story, over a photo of them dancing at some charity gala. The first few minutes were exactly what everyone expected. Beautiful photos of the happy couple at various events, romantic weekend getaways, family dinners. I'd set it to soft acoustic music, the kind of soundtrack that makes everything look like a romantic movie montage. The crowd made all the appropriate cooing sounds. Celeste squeezed Grayson's hand and whispered something in his ear that made him smile. Then the tone shifted, the music faded, and a new video began to play. Not one of the sweet, candid clips I'd gotten from Grayson, but something else entirely. Something I'd pulled from Celeste's own phone during one of our planning sessions, when she'd excused herself to use the bathroom and left her device unlocked on the table. The screen filled with an image of Celeste lying in bed, clearly drunk, her hair messy and her makeup smeared. She was talking to someone off-camera, gesturing with a wine glass that was dangerously close to spilling. The room went dead silent. "I mean, seriously," Celeste's voice came through the speakers, slightly slurred but perfectly audible. "Grayson has absolutely no idea what he's getting into. The man thinks I actually care about his boring finance job and his stupid golf hobby." A few people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Grayson's face went pale, but he hadn't fully processed what he was hearing yet. "The prenup expires after 18 months. Drunk, Celeste continued laughing at something Troy said off-camera. 18 months of playing the devoted wife, and then I can bleed him dry and bounce. Easy money." That's when the real panic started. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Someone near the back said, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. Grayson stood up so fast his chair fell backward, his eyes locked on the screen, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. Celeste spun around to look at the projection, her face cycling through confusion, horror, and rage in about 3 seconds. "Turn it off," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Turn it off right now." She lunged toward the projector, but Uncle Dean was ready for her. He stepped smoothly into her path and caught her by the shoulders, holding her back with the kind of gentle firmness that made it clear she wasn't getting past him. "I think everyone should see this," he said calmly. The video kept playing. Drunk Celeste was now laughing about something Troy had said about Grayson's pathetic romantic gestures, and how easy it was to manipulate someone who was desperate to be loved. That's when I stepped forward. I walked to the front of the terrace, positioning myself where everyone could see me clearly. The woman who'd been too ugly to stand beside the bride, who'd spent 32 years being invisible in her own family, who'd finally decided she was done being silent. "If I'm too ugly to stand beside you in a photo," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the stunned crowd, "I might as well stand in the truth." Celeste stopped struggling against Uncle Dean and stared at me with pure hatred. "You did this! You sick, jealous bitch, you did this!" "I did," I said simply. "And there's more," the slideshow continued. More clips of Celeste talking to Troy, planning their real estate venture, mocking Grayson's trust and generosity. Video of her at that work event I'd seen discussing investment opportunities with her secret partner while her fiancé paid for her champagne. But then it got personal. A voice message played where Celeste talked about how pathetic I was, how I'd never amount to anything more than a small-town florist with delusions of creativity. How our parents had always been embarrassed by me, how the family would be better off if I just stayed in my lane and stopped trying to be part of things that mattered. Another clip where she told Troy about faking her anxiety attack during my piano recital when we were kids. "I couldn't let her have that moment," she laughed. "She was getting too much attention. I had to remind everyone who the real star of the family was." The crowd was riveted now, watching this private destruction play out in public. Some people looked horrified. Others looked fascinated. A few had their phones out, probably recording everything for social media. My parents stood frozen near the bar, their faces pale with shock and something that might have been shame. All those years of enabling Celeste's behavior, of dismissing my feelings and concerns, of choosing sides without ever asking if they were choosing correctly. The final video was the most damaging. Celeste Stone, sober this time, talking to Troy about the timeline for the divorce. How she'd document instances of Grayson being controlling and emotionally distant. How she'd play the victim perfectly, make everyone feel sorry for her, ensure that she walked away with maximum sympathy and minimum blame. "The best part is everyone already thinks I'm too good for him anyway," she said. "They'll just assume he couldn't handle being married to someone like me." When the slideshow finally ended, the silence was deafening. Grayson was staring at the screen like he was seeing his entire future collapse in real time. His hands were shaking and his breathing looked shallow and rapid. Grayson, Celeste started, her voice taking on that sweet, manipulative tone she used when she needed to do damage control. Baby, this isn't what it looks like. She edited these videos, she took everything out of context, she's been jealous of us from the beginning. Stop. His voice was quiet, but it cut through her excuses like a blade. Just stop talking. He turned to look at her, and the expression on his face was something I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly. Something deeper than that. Complete disillusionment. The death of trust. How long? He asked. How long what, Grayson, you have to understand? How long have you been planning to leave me? Celeste opened her mouth, probably to launch into another round of denials and explanations. But something in Grayson's eyes stopped her. Maybe she finally realized that the performance was over, that there was no talking her way out of this one. The engagement is off, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. He pulled the ring from his pocket where he'd been carrying it as a backup in case Celeste wanted to switch it out for photos and set it down on the nearest table. The wedding is cancelled. Everything is cancelled. That's when all hell broke loose. Celeste started screaming, not the calculated emotional outburst she'd perfected over the years, but genuine rage and panic. She called me every name she could think of, accused me of ruining her life. Out of jealousy, demanded that someone explain how I could be so selfish and vindictive. Blake, her maid of honor, backed away slowly, clearly wanting to distance herself from the disaster unfolding in front of her. Other guests started gathering their things, making polite excuses about early meetings and prior commitments. Grayson walked over to where I was standing. For a moment I thought he might blame me too. Shoot the messenger. Tell me I should have minded my own business. Instead, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Thank you." Then he walked away, leaving his former fiancé screaming at anyone who would listen that this was all a misunderstanding, that I'd somehow fabricated everything, that she was the real victim here. The party was over. The truth was out. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible anymore. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd never faced real consequences before. Pure, unhinged desperation. Within hours of the party ending, Celeste was calling everyone she knew, trying to control the narrative before it could spiral completely out of her hands. I know this because she called me 17 times that night, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to screaming threats. "Lauren, you have to help me fix this," she sobbed in the first message. "I know we've had our differences, but we're family. You can't just destroy my life like this." By message number 10, the tone had shifted dramatically. "You pathetic, jealous bitch. You've always hated me because I'm everything you'll never be. You doctored those videos because you can't stand that I'm successful and happy, and you're just a lonely florist with no life." By message 17, she was bargaining again. "I'll give you anything you want. Money, a partnership in my business, anything. Just tell everyone those videos were fake. Tell them it was some kind of sick joke. Please, Lauren, I'm begging you." I didn't return any of the calls. The next morning, she started working the phones in earnest, calling every mutual friend, every family member, anyone who might be willing to listen to her side of the story. Her narrative was simple and predictable. Lauren had always been jealous of her success. Lauren had somehow doctored the videos using technology she probably learned from YouTube tutorials. Lauren was unstable, vindictive, and clearly needed professional help. Some people bought it, at least initially. Celeste had always been charismatic, and she knew exactly which buttons to push with different audiences. She played the victim beautifully, complete with tears and dramatic pauses and strategic references to her difficult relationship with her sister. But here's the thing about the truth. Once it's out there, really out there, it's almost impossible to put back in the box. Too many people had been at that party. Too many phones had been recording. The videos were too clear, too obviously authentic, too consistent with behavior that some people had witnessed firsthand but had never felt comfortable talking about. My parents called me the morning after the party. I let it go to voicemail. "Lauren, honey," Mom's voice was shaky and uncertain. "We need to talk about what happened last night. This whole situation is it's very complicated, and we think maybe everyone should just take some time to cool down before we make any decisions we might regret." Even in crisis, they were choosing Celeste, still trying to find a way to make this my fault or at least my responsibility to fix. Some things never change. But Uncle Dean called too, and that conversation was very different. "I always knew you had more spine than the rest of us," he said when I picked up. "You just finally decided to show it." "Are you disappointed in me?" I asked, because part of me was still that 12-year-old girl who needed someone in my family to be proud of me. "Disappointed, Lauren. I'm impressed as hell. Celeste has been getting away with this kind of behavior her entire life because everyone was too scared or too invested in the family image to call her out. Someone needed to stand up to her eventually. Even if it destroys the family. Honey, she destroyed this family years ago. You just made it visible." The fallout for Celeste was swift and brutal. Grayson didn't just walk away quietly. His lawyers issued a statement the next morning, formally announcing the end of the engagement and making it clear that the decision was final and non-negotiable. They also included language about potential legal action if certain parties attempted to spread false information about their client or the circumstances surrounding the breakup. The wedding vendors started calling within 48 hours. The venue, the caterer, the florist she'd hired instead of me, the photographer, the band. Everyone wanted to know about cancellation fees and payment schedules. Celeste had put down deposits totaling almost $80,000, and most of it was non-refundable. She didn't have $80,000. She'd been living off Grayson's generosity for months, funding her lifestyle with his credit cards, and assuming she'd never have to pay any of it back. Blake, her perfect sorority sister, maid of honor, blocked her on every social media platform within a week. So did half of her friend group. The other half started posting subtly shady stories about the importance of authentic friendships and knowing who people really are beneath the surface. Her job became uncomfortable when the story started circulating in her professional circles. Nothing official happened, but suddenly she wasn't getting invited to the important meetings anymore. Her ideas weren't being taken as seriously. People were polite but distant, like they weren't quite sure what version of Celeste they were dealing with. Within a month, she'd moved back in with our parents. The apartment she'd been sharing with Grayson was his, and he'd made it clear she needed to find somewhere else to live. She couldn't afford her own place in Manhattan anymore, not without his financial support. I heard all of this secondhand, mostly from Uncle Dean, who had a talent for gathering family gossip without seeming like he was prying. I didn't reach out to Celeste, and she eventually stopped calling me. I think she realized that the person she'd spent 32 years underestimating wasn't going to be manipulated or guilt-tripped into fixing the mess she'd made. 3 months after the engagement party, I was in my shop arranging a display of blue hydrangeas when Uncle Dean stopped by with his usual coffee and newspaper routine. But this time he had something extra with him, a cream-colored envelope with my name written on it in careful handwriting. "This came to my house," he said, setting it down next to my cash register. "Forwarded from Grayson." I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a simple thank you card, the kind you might send after a dinner party or a thoughtful gift. The front had a watercolor illustration of white roses. "Lauren." The note inside read, "I wanted to thank you for your courage. I know it couldn't have been easy to do what you did, especially knowing the cost to your family relationships. I also know you didn't do it for me, but I'm grateful anyway. The enclosed donation has been made in your name to the Metro Women's Shelter because I think you understand better than most what it means to find the strength to leave a situation that's hurting you. I hope you're doing well. Grayson." Attached to the note was a receipt showing a donation of $25,000 to the women's shelter made in my name. I stood there in my little flower shop, surrounded by the quiet beauty I'd built for myself, holding evidence that my decision to speak up had rippled out into something bigger than just family drama. Somewhere in the city, women who were trying to escape bad situations would have a little more support because someone had been brave enough to tell the truth about the person they loved. Uncle Dean was watching my face, probably trying to gauge my reaction. "You know what's funny?" I said, setting the card down and reaching for another bundle of hydrangeas. "What's that?" I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt completely genuine. Not the careful, protective smile I'd perfected over the years, but something real and unguarded and free. "Turns out ugly truths are the prettiest in the light." Uncle Dean laughed, the kind of deep, satisfied laugh that comes when someone you love finally gets the ending they deserve. Outside my shop window, the afternoon sun was hitting the sidewalk at just the right angle, casting everything in golden light. Customers were walking by, some stopping to admire the window display I'd arranged that morning. My phone was buzzing with orders from people who'd heard about my work through word of mouth, the way the best businesses grow. For 32 years, I'd been invisible in my own family. The afterthought, the disappointment, the one who didn't quite measure up to everyone else's expectations. But invisibility, I'd learned, could be a superpower if you knew how to use it right. And I was done being invisible. So what do you think? Was I right to expose the truth? Or should I have minded my own business? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button for more family drama that'll keep you hooked. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.